Hello, American. Salute. There's captivity syntax of Fox Connecticut News. Their syntax is their recording capacity, demonstrating, confirmed, is being influenced by like all the news companies. If you call them up on the phone, they'll change and fake what you say as a digital and wire crime methods and mail crime methods and falsified police reports methods that police departments plural have with the same house/s through time as ones involved with their extended family members with Saudi attackers to use remotely effectively both Saudi Arabia's name, America's name, Afghanistan's name, South Korea's name, North Korea's name, China's name, Japan's name. All these used remotely, criminally foreign influence. Tactically delusions raw. Increasingly a Mark Violet and a Justin Klovinskis. Our Fred Grisey. I never saw them together. These are people from other areas that sought me out to make confessions and demonstrations. I recorded being used consciously, having been used consciously to put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, to the people around them. Around me, as ones involved that attached me to fake conversations with the police at the police department when I was a kid and then when I was an adult. And the same names that had roles with that. Like an older police brother, I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. I had not a word of conversation with other police officer at the Wethersfield Police Department. They also have people involved with religious spots, involved with Old Town Cafe, and people involved with Charlie Bowes, and regarding people involved with the religious, like the beginning of the Old Testament, the beginning of crime. People don't even know about it because they're reading the books. The people with passions, emotions about it, people countering it, and the exceptions, they have collusions with differences rackets. Too, like regarding what they think about alcohol or that, they're fitting, in other words, all kinds of collusions at Hartford Hospital and behavioral racketeering, worse than war crimes that our country's intelligence families have. A bunch of people next to Harvard Hospital have roles with the World Trade Center attack, with the Saudi attackers, and with our own foreign and domestic military. A Leahy family fake conversations with me, roles with them, forging and switching names. I mean, forging names of other doctors, putting people in whole fake concert conversations with people that don't even know them, never were at all. And they're using that within how they use and have used all natures of investigators to keep the statutes in, like they're going to put people in 20 years in prison because they were standing by and watching what's happening at the Capitol. You know, in other words, while they're in roles with all kinds of predicate acts with facts, methods, recorded plural, but also used singularly at the Connecticut corrections offices and at the Connecticut judicial branch offices, that with names that are increasingly collusions with all other nature of crime scenes, including digital. The FBI has roles with a Joshua Julian on Facebook page of a principal upskirt nature since before he was proven involved with that. He's involved with the northern and southern themed military that are criminally foreign influence with a whole bunch of different countries leading up to the World Trade Center attack long term. And in it, a DeMora family is increasingly recorded. And you know, one time he asked me every time someone wanted to ask me if I wanted to buy something. That's how I recorded things, because I recorded people planting evidences. But with others involved, you try to address it, they change fake what people say and worse. And properly, when we address it properly, it shows that there are roles with a whole bunch of different countries and overt criminal enterprises that were grouped here and there before anyone was born. And they have already been speaking about differences, therefore using names. Tactical ulterior from how our founders told them to. Then the breaching method showed them means for others to discern that. And then it hid that the way it showed them that they could get away with it. And then it showed them they need to hide that. And while it's showing them they need to hide it to come and how they can get away with it. This kept our three branch of government, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. A whole bunch of roles with natures of investigators involved with the name Perone, too. Perone, with next to people, next to the journalists and their family members, all along roads and routes like Main Street in Hartford, along Franklin Avenue, the Borough Turnpike before its conjunction, where it runs into the heart of Hartford, where J.P. Morgan's grave is at. J.P. Morgan had to loan money to the American government to help them fight the world wars. But you guys, you want to use that now. Like, say someone knows more about that than me. You guys want to use that knowledge of good and evil to get over on me and everyone else regarding James Madison's plan. And we know that they use the right to lie, that they don't have the right to lie. The identity of the law. When did they have the integrity to speak about the law, leaving out how we have black people as whites of eyes? Little kids in the suburbs and in the cities can both discern that all these natural means to discern how the names of the people of sciences can't afford to be appreciated. That nature of truths that we have been actually discerning since we were little kids. All people have been faking and changing others' words if they're not entertaining. Fact, human nature, quality, aspects of nature, the breaching method never stopped using remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. The breaching method is measured and maintained. Self-body roles with other communicated for our founders, and they declassified that they communicated for ourselves. It's not because he has a mental illness, Joe Biden, how he's using criminal insidious natures of fact, human nature, quality, aspect, they're bullying and logic. A, therefore, B, all unions. There's a right through their administrations, they're putting fake things in databases and then telling them, briefing the presidents. The presidents, they don't have, the Democrat, Republican, they don't have one that could afford not to fake and change things, pretend not to realize things, have people anyway already shown they have to act while other people are filming to put fake ties, fake natures of ties between people. Completely faked too, with Joshua Julian. Increasingly, people at Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University. I never saw my neighbor there. Saw him next to there one time. Tried to make a fake exception with others. Increasingly, people tied to Ray Clow and his father with the name Ray Clow. Now, these are people involved further then and now with the Joshua Julian and with the Joshua Stryker. Per others that confessed, my neighbors involved. Now, my neighbors are also additionally involved with the Wethersfield Police, intercities, and mayors. Increasingly, people tied to a former mayor, Gold, and his family member keep getting brought up in confessions to me, designed to make it look like I knew them in the past. In other words, she planted some things in databases. In other words, with increasingly people tied to a Gold family. Remember that. I don't know them. They need to pretend other by breaking the law, federal laws too. These are ones involved with child abusers, leaders of kids, including sexual, medical, and legal at the same time. There are judges, family members, and their roles with the other police forms as their family members, people tied to their family members. A judge, a Dr. Shub of modern languages, involved with people from all these different countries, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, on off Kitts Lane and Two Rod Highway, and on off Elm Street in Rocky Hill, collusion with my neighbor's confessions about that since I was a kid and demonstrations about that. Same people recorded involved, planting evidence on all sides of my house from other areas with the interbranch forging and switching names. Timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names at and next to body dumping spots. All this stuff they know because I had confirmations on Facebook. That's why they take people's Facebook pages. So I never had a word of response. The first or the second time is the only two times I ever saw a Robert Rodriguez on my street. The second time he said, "Oh, you know that girl I was walking by with the first time." The other time, he said she died untimely death, which is, even if that was made up, even if the one at Trinity College was made up. These were the police also the intelligence community also demonstrated my other previous neighbors, forced persuaded to collusion/S with the people involved with the syntax and the contacts with all kinds of natures of organized crime with the untimely death at Trinity College, and the Joshua Julian and the Joshua Stryker that fake ties to me, fake natures of ties to me. Increasingly, there's a Judge Smith. In other words, involved with a Jennifer Smith. I never had a word of conversation with her. A whole bunch of people planting evidences and covering up their rules with overt criminal enterprises, including private ones, actually not legitimately, with the intelligence community associated with people named Lombardo and Walters, who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they're involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with the people named Cololo, were involved with the Wethersfield police. They attached me to fake conversation with them at the police station as a kid and then as an adult. And to hide that, they pretended such through the news too. And these are people involved with other, with gangs and people with threats, because not legitimately as unmarked police forms. And involved also with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes. These are people on Facebook page of the campuses with some black KKK Confederate flag theme names, and their differences, roles, like with black families involved with the state judicial branch offices, involved with their educators, putting fake things in databases and refusing people to know their names, right where there's a differences, racketeering going on. No, they're forging and switching names, putting fake motivations for it. Increasingly, these are people with the state police involved with an Eric Jensen too, and an Eric Oliveri. And Eric Oliveri had I don't know, I forgot the name of that teacher. He called me Wall Street. He used to repeat, "Oh, Wall Street." In other words, I had wanted to buy a stock named DACA. I didn't know what DACA was. I found it because of a dart towards a newspaper. And it was in the process of confessions tied to a Mr. Abruzzi. A Mr. Abruzzi is involved with people in classes before I was in fifth grade and after when I was in fifth grade, who are increasingly collusion/S with names next to each campus I went, who are involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. And they'll tell you this, but you have to ask them correctly. And the other ones are ones that I recorded involved forcing the principal child abuser with worse than they put him in prison for. With the prisons also recorded that had roles forcing that. And they had roles with other natures of crime scenes that were instantly brought up, and including a serial killer's body dumping spot. They had roles with it from years before that. The same people, a Ray Colo, there's a title house, it used to be there. A Ray Colo and a Joe DeMore recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have roles with Kevin Dillon, and people with something to do with judges and prosecutors and criminal enterprises, demonstrably with them and people tied to them at the community center of Wethersfield and all sides of it. And with this, it has something to do with their collusions with names at the corrections offices of Wethersfield / Hartford, where it is, and the state judicial branch offices, and with town lines, intercities. There are people with Southington involved also with I don't know their name, but involved with increasingly people on Church Street in Old Wethersfield have been involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with courts and with police forms, and with them pretending to be against this, that. Oh, in other words, including with Sandy Hook, there are more Sandy Hook predators of kids involved with the name, increasingly the name O'Brien too. I was involved with ones next to the state capitol, planting evidences and non-verbally making confessions, like with others make the verbal. And it's all at the same time. That's a phenomenon where they're stacking things because they were already used. There were already sequence shifts, collusions, predicate acts with facts, collusions, with names on all sides of cases, criminal and civil, and with the courts at the same time. and the names with the judicial branch officers and corrections officers as the ones they were involved with Washington, D.C. a bunch of ways. Involved with 2 times I had a speech class. Involved with people recorded a bunch of ways from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield all the way along Route 175, which it turns into, through Newington and right to Central Connecticut State University. All sides of that are increasingly people next to campuses planting evidences. Like next to Harvard Hospital's campus, a Christopher Walters recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he has collusions with people next to Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with people who were in my 2 speech class teachers classes, and had conversations with my 2 speech class teachers who were also involved with various natures of criminal and civil cases where they had collusions with the crime scenes and various natures of drugs and medicines crimes, and with the police forms against that. The differences of what drugs they're dealing with, in other words. And these are people increasingly with the South Civiello and his neighbors and his family involved with identity theft, fraud, slaying. He was in my 4th grade class, and there's the name Morin, and I believe it's a different spelling than one that was reportedly raped or killed by MS-13. Note there were passionate emotions about them sending back, and they take all the time to focus on them sending back someone who's not even an American citizen and who they said was a criminal anyway. Not just, in other words, meanwhile, they don't have due process here. See that, and they were already shown they're part of all kinds of evidences rackets, all kinds of natures of collusions with all natures of crime scenes, way worse than the people involved with that. Per way worse, that's keeping that the outcome at countries A through Z. You see how they bring up isms like in other words, in the Holocaust and exceptions like the Holocaust. How could they bring up the Holocaust and make the right outcome if they don't bring in black pupils, whites of eyes? We don't even have that addressed. How can we address anything else? That's where our lead is, because nature communicates about difference here. We are a human species body of individual bodies with all group differences. Now more and more through other systems to keep obfuscating that difference, which is showing us it is not our species body that invented how things about ourselves, and that are distinct from the other species bodies, but non-distinct and simultaneous, but also per that, not us nor them, but it is all things anyway. Many pray, vaccines. We're not supposed to agree about the name of it. Nature shows us. It is functional, being a distinct identity of hyper-conjunctional, hyper-invisible, but still discernible. It is why and how the parts of speech of English grammar are about the invisible, but still discernible. And they come with this. They come with means to discern the hyper-invisible, but still discernible. It is why and how. It is what we are appreciating when where and how and why we appreciate the need for more than one name for a verb, like a predicate, like a participle, like a gerund. But discern the participle as the participle nature, as the participle nature is the present participle in the past participle. They are each distinctly about time, but also non-distinctly because they are also both about forever nature. We are capable of discerning the identity of all space/existence the way it shows us we are. But we have what is proper for short words replaced and pretended theoretical, where we have what is pretended scientific, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw quality aspects, and fact-cheating nature. This is most principle, and where we begin with black people's whites of eyes, this is principle. A breaching method had reassigned, but nature communicates with this when nature is not criminal insidiousness nature. And then America's founders were born. And already there were an array of countries and international companies, things involved with that that are already being and haven't been used, just like countries A through Z. We know right through our founders, right through our founding. We have this replaced right through our books, but we know that entrenched was roles with slavery, northern colonies, southern colonies. Wasn't a, they make a T tax and they're measuring maintain that up because they didn't read. In other words, the summaries of history that are necessary to then to begin to describe the founding of modern countries A through Z. The short words have been changed. And that's forced entertainment with people that want to use their knowledge of good and evil. And they're showing people before they get, they're showing the identities and the names of the people, the sciences are a nature of criminal insidiousness, that people aren't going to want to take part with it. In other words, it's not just the military doesn't have recruiting. It's because the military is not about the Constitution on the bridge. It's all these things, though. It's each of these sciences sickly, distinctly criminal insidious natures of positives and negatives, collusion/S. Otherwise, that body is sensed, including if that body is the majority of people, including if it's everybody. It's why and how they have such serious conversations that we're obligated to have. Instead, we put it with theaters and people pretending, well, that's my job. You know, have some KKK guy on the stage, some black guy, and they yell at each other. And all the exception into collusion/S. The books have been communicating other for James Madison and the founders behind him and his plan than they communicated for us. And then further, they're communicating other than George Washington communicated for us to communicate about his extortion, for example. None will allow that to be told about honestly, because no one had, and why and how no one had free speech. All you guys do is value the right to lie on a mass scale so hard that you guys are leaking for the breaching method, because that's how it set it up. The breaching method used confessions before the religious messengers were even born. Religious messengers, the campuses had already become criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought from off them. Already there was a fact-cheating nature possession of everyone, incapable of affording to be, let alone to protract short words by the identity the sciences share properly. Otherwise, that body would be sentenced, and it would be adapted to. There's a whole breaching method here. Is recorded where and how other things, others ourselves, were our blame for where our founders communicated for us to understand there was a breaching method entrenched here too. The nature of debate that has stayed in the background where people pretend, oh, if our founders didn't have free speech, how would they have free speech? And they do this debate is also often, it's not in real life. It's like a theater debate where they're and the networks and the thing, all the different media. In other words, because if they put it a real and make fact treatment natures proper. I was writing about, so Fox Connecticut News has stories and roles with names on the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices and corrections offices involved with people with the name Sullivan, and they don't give the whole with crime methods where they don't give the whole name, and they lie about their motivations to not just cover up sequence shifts, but also sense that they are covered up, and that roles with that are self-valued. Where and how self-value rules with lying is a maintained predicate acts with facts predator role, where the police don't recruit. People aren't going to become police because the police, they offensively communicate to us they are fake identities of integrity with the law. We have black people's rights of eyes. They have failed to allow free speech for the suburbs, let alone for New York City, let alone for Hartford. let alone the quality of debate, nature of debate, would have revealed revelations, answers, the hyper-evidential, hyper-archaeological. Hartford was forced more so than anything else by the breaching method to unfold architecturally as the spacing of the homes and as the design of them where they would be converted to two family and three family homes, where and how this breaching method designed everyone to need the breaching methods value nature systems with our food, the same way it did this to countries A through Z, and had been sustained against the phenomenon of Native Americans against Native Americans, not just because they didn't have a name, like a unified government, because A through Z, since some ancient times, we have been separated from what nature had presented already unabridged before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced and tactically delusions wrought more and more. Forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded, there are proofs. It is more probable to convict, to theorize, let alone to convict. And it is more practical that from off their locations, because this is also how it is manifest now. And then when we go back, no one will allow anybody to be honest about how demonstrably there are other names involved with instances, descriptions. Like, for example, there are increasingly people tied to a Ray Colo and a Joe DeMauro. They're educators. Have a Ray Reynolds. Involved in a Joe DeMauro, John DeMauro, Paul DeMauro. Have roles with families next to a kindergarten I went to, who are increasingly involved with drugs and medicines crimes. With the interbranch families, though, with identity theft, fraud, slander, they act passions, emotions, lie about their motivations for it. There's a Christopher White who put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me with people from Central Connecticut State University involved with like a spot of confessions too about that 3 spots at the end of the Burn Turnpike. There are also confirmations. Ray Colo has roles with identity theft, frauds, and slanders, and other worse federal evidences crimes and organized crimes with people at 2-Route Highway named Spotter and Delafera, and they have probate court judges and their family members, and their roles with the corner of the street on Elm Street and Route 3, years since before Mazzucato Bakery was there. But Mazzucato Bakery also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have collusions. They don't understand the extent because everyone's having been used remotely criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence. That's why it's important to get them on paper, one name and sequence. So they have intercities of Connecticut, people with interstates. Also, Boston College is involved with a Fred Gruzet with the Mayano family, and with state police families interstates, involved with medical and sexual offenders of kids, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. And the kids acting tied to the fake things tied in databases didn't even go to the same schools. A Fred Gruzet lived next to my school when I was a kid, but he didn't even go to my school. He's increasingly involved with judges and prosecutors and their family members all along the Route 3 and its conjunctions, like the state judicial branch offices, involved with digital crimes and various natures of federal evidences rackets, worse than war crimes roles, which is what this is about, Black peoples. Relent not here. So you guys want to not relent behind things that are not true, exactly the breaching method want to need. This breaching method keeps classes either fighting with each other or agreed exactly what the breaching method needs. More and more, they're going to have, they'll have groupthink. They want people to go in groups because they can't entertain I mean, they shouldn't even have time to be thinking about such. And that doesn't mean they have to stack the kids up with no time. They should be just teaching them verbally. Oh, we have to make sure they can read. Get out. Then pay attention to what's in their books. See how the school book depository is involved with the subject of the murder of the assassination of former president slash chief Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. And how about was that 1963? If someone was born in 1860 at the beginning of the Civil War, they died in 1960. We still have other communicated about what stuff will cause the Civil War than our founders communicated for us to understand about what caused the Civil War, which is James Madison's plan. James Madison's identity is still stolen. There is expert leading to the identities of law. Will ask the experts on that. Our founders not only did they not have free speech, the laws were such in nature that everyone had to pretend other simultaneously or be sensed, including that body was a majority of people, including it was everyone. Any grouping of countries, while as locations, areas, and states as is. In other words, it's a big difference if you're telling people, even in the suburbs, you're telling people to go get a job. Look at those people and how many people must be inside those buildings at the same time in New York City behind the people in rap videos. And see how they're always pretending passions and emotions about jobs with the media. They're offensively being and haven't been used remotely, shown they need to hide things of past, active, and to come, pretending not to realize details. These are people who will fake and change what people say, even if they mention predicate acts about the World Trade Center. There are only 3 branches of government, clearer than day, originally and still. They were involved with 6 things from off their locations. They were only allowed to be collusion slashes. People go, oh, ally, enemy. That all that left out because they were only capable of it. You guys. So please get them on paper, one name in sequence. Former director of the F.B.I. Robert Luskin has the branches of government individually grouped together with an officer Hunter too. President Biden, I hope to God you don't believe in what they tell you. Still, same thing, President Obama, President Trump, right through your original first administration. I haven't got a response. They're putting fake things in databases and they're leaking because it's the use of location/S. They're increasingly all natures of investigation. Constantly, they have people that say something to someone else that don't even know them, and they change it, fake what's said, and they just fake it, make it up, or they just have people walking. There are proofs that they had someone walking next to me, and then someone else was walking in the other direction when I was a kid, and the person was like, in other words, they're planting evidence on all sides of the campuses through time. Increasingly, these are people with like next to Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, is increasingly rolls with identity thefts and frauds that way, where also investigators have roles with crime scenes and the players involved, who are also at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists now too. It's also relative to their use of the word extremism. You guys don't find it strange where and how all of a sudden they need a term like extremism? Oh, but look at the recent trends. How when they're the databases, the research locations are maintained, influenced by recorded, clearer than day. A whole bunch of distinct natures of predicate acts with facts and organized crimes, influences, and criminal foreign influences / hypercriminal foreign influences. I'm not even a lawyer. That's not a formal term, but nature itself shows us needs to discern that. Like, for example, how they were distinct colonies that were distinct possessions of countries themselves distinctly, but also non-distinctly the possession of a hyper-foreign, with slavery that had been entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies, distinctly, but also non-distinctly, there were roles with slavery, northern colonies, southern colonies. And then America's founders were born. So that and all that it caused, the roles with it, Nature was demonstrating that too. Those demonstrations were effectively blamed on other things other than themselves. You guys are styles, needs, natures of logic, only capable of changing and faking what people say, or of ignoring it and wait to see what happens. You guys are obligated by mandated law. You guys should tell Judge Napolitano, make sure he hears, because he's obligated by mandated law not to change and fake my short words. And get the Wethersfield Police on paper, one name and sequence with the Connecticut interbranch, and the names they brought up, including with private tied to them, and with the news at the same time. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. These are increasingly people next to Fox Connecticut News and Hartford too, and next to the WTNH, a number of ways. Clearer than day, Congress and the FBI and other agencies and police forms, they use the predicate acts of facts methods kept criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, predators. Certain type of, just like the same way, like that movie. What's that movie? Lord of the Flies. But in this case, the counter to is collusion, all natures of difference, and and self-added rolls with it. You guys, if you allow subject treatments proper, subject again is invisible but still discernible, but the hyper invisible but still discernible shows us how subjects individually, grouped, and simultaneously, they come with the hyper simultaneous. Like those three parts of time, typically grouped. That part of the past we know is true always. That part now active we know is true always. The part, like the seed, better than knowing it's true always. And it's only increasing value even if it never gets here, like the seasons that are to come. Or even if one more season never comes. There's a Scott Ritter like a month or so ago on one of the live streams of a Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel. He said that the world almost ended. In other words, one of the things that tariffs are about is about how we're naive A through Z countries have locations, areas, and states that want to speak about economies, pretending they can't discern where and how a hyperforeign had and has possession over that. Oh, but that's free speech. I'm just talking. That's why, in other words, the courts know that they have collusion/S too. And like, for example, on a mass scale, they hurt people when they have rules. They have people hurt by planting evidences, by influencing people to say things, fake things. They even fake that by timing where they're going to be walk. In other words, by switching names, switching sequences. This hides it from others too. Actual motivations. So increasingly, people names at and next to campuses have been planting predicate acts with facts rolls and federal evidences crimes with names on all sides of my house. And they'll tell you this, but you have to ask them properly. With the Wethersfield police forging and switching names and refusing to identify themselves legitimately and making confessions. And these are also more involved with threats, to rape threats. And that was and people involved with the principal child abusers campus. And I noticed when they pretend that when you address them involved with federal evidences, crimes, identity thefts, and frauds, the black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, collusion/S. They pretend you're complaining about how they have a Confederate flag. You're complaining about that, or you're complaining about them because they're black. There's a little differences racketeering here. These are also with the sexual groups next to the campuses involved with putting predicate acts with facts in databases that have nothing to do with like a Oliveri family has roles with a Joe Aiello too, with sexual groups next to like that are like transsexual groups next to next to Trinity College and next to Central Connecticut State University, involved with people also with religious passions and emotions, involved with sequence shifts and their roles with doctors who are also ones with badges and judges and prosecutors putting fake things in databases, speaking them into records too, like little sick punks, while tactically delusions raw. In other words, all natures of investigators have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. At the same time as in other words, the news. Same time as names on off the state judicial branch offices increasingly involved, the people on off the state corrections offices, with the World Trade Center predicate acts, and with these mixed natures of organized crimes associated with research locations and polling locations. For example, too, per the functions by the breaching method of where people use words like research or the very words of our founders, but leaving out their what they communicated about how they didn't have free speech and why they didn't have free speech. And replacing the breaching method as a scientific value inside the communications of our founders like James Madison and those plural behind him and his plan. George Washington, with his little leftover soldiers, didn't have means, even with a French general's help, to force the other founders to be. And to break those crazy fact-cheating, nature, torture, extortion, slavery method laws against every single person. In other words, so you guys debate like punks when people say things that simple sentences. So you can get so you guys because you guys on a mass scale you prevent people from using lists. It's only it's a little bit extensive, but in other words, originally still the three branches of the government, the intelligence tied to them. You know, everything hyper additionally. First, it's all location /s in ways that no one wanted. Everyone had already been collusions with semi-ancient times. And then religious messengers were born, demonstrably without free speech. To an extent, they had to put cipher with decipher. It's why and how the beginning of the Old Testament says, only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. But no one even knows about that part. And the people who counter the religion or the books or whatever, and the people who defend it passionately, they have collusions with their fact-cheating nature, quality aspects of nature, as the people who wrote the religious books knew they would. This is why, too, at the beginning of the Quran, there's also a part that says all that matters is if you're honest about your use of the name of the identity of all spaceless existence. You know, about the name Allah. And it says if they don't agree to it and they're honest about it, love them anyway. And it says if they do agree about it, for the slightest reason, don't pray in a mosque. Doesn't say it says all that matters. It doesn't say all that matters if you don't eat pork. It doesn't say all that matters if you don't drink. It's bad to drink. And there are proofs that they put pork as against, as weapons. Where and how everything was unfolding. Where and how the names of the human species body, of individual bodies, became forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to self-value roles within that system's tactical ulterior from the one that will only increasingly demonstrate this to us with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And the reason someone would do that is because it simultaneously is used in a way /s to hide from how nature is also demonstrating to us A through Z. There was a human fact-shipping nature breaching method involved at A through Z. Thank God, see, people don't realize it, but nature is also showing us it is a hyper currently foreign influence one. And it caused criminal foreign influences to hide between that, right where and how it's blamed to where it's not the blame. It's the hyper currently foreign influence. The courts and the police forms and the state judicial branch offices in Connecticut and the corrections offices, many ways they have and have had more roles facilitating overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and different natures of organized crimes against the kids at the campuses, at their homes, at and next to parks they go to. Increasingly, people next to the campuses in Hartford, Connecticut, have roles and names next to campuses in Wethersfield, Connecticut. Also with the news with identity theft, fraud, slanders, which is where timed collusion with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, because they've been differences racketeering worse than war crimes, collusion /s roles for a long time. They need to hide their actual value, as all rules with cases, including the courts themselves, all sides of cases, their lawyers, the police force, family members, all with that, including the lawyers, the people that everywhere they go. WFSB Connecticut's Channel 3 News is like, for example, they're refusing to fix fake conversation or get me anyone to respond to. They're stealing my identity. They have a Trantolo and Trantolo also. I had barely any words at all with them. They have crime methods where lawyers change what people say and pretend it's because they're a lawyer. In other words, they pretend people have conspiracy theories. They're changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded, too. And in other words, they're just faking it. And our campuses film 24/7. So increasingly, Hartford courts and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, have roles with a Dean Judd and his family members, and with a Dean Alford and people next to Trinity College on New Park Avenue involved with some, with some murders and untimely deaths and identity theft, fraud, slanders, cover-ups in the form of ones to cover that up too, that were perpetrated by people associated with a Joshua Stryker. And there were also people that the only reason I know his name is there were people that were just put next to me to make confessions and then pretend they know me. And and fake ties, fake nature ties to me, including with the people I don't know at all, like Joshua Julian. Increasingly involved with the northern military and the southern military. Sickly, distinctly criminally foreign influence, but also sickly, non-distinctly. Right where and how have been used remotely criminally foreign influence. Increasingly, Eric Oliveri, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed also. There's a Joshua Stryker involved with him up with other intelligence and co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and their family members and neighbors involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders of people on and off campuses affected behind their backs. So there's no means to counter it. And they try to make fake exceptions. Oh, but remember the time you were walking by the corner and someone said that? In other words, they can't even respond to what's recorded now. They respond anyway. That's how they put, in other words, all kinds of natures of organized crime with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the court's names and the police forms and their roles with mayors and conjunctions to them, other natures of politicians. All that is recorded how maintained. The outcome /s their roles with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes at countries A through Z. Here, Anthony. We don't leave out how we have black people's rights of eyes, the hyper evidential. Get Judge Napolitano, please, to get Fox News, to get on paper, to get the WFSB on paper, one name in sequence. Get me off the fake conversations with them. I believe it's a Roger Suzanne He's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with them anyway. A Roger Suzanne with a bunch of people at and next to Harvard Hospital's campus and with the Institute of Living there. Also further professionally and personally involved with WFSB and with the intelligence next to them. Also with sexual, medical, and even religious spots. Roles further with abuses of kids. And next to Fox Connecticut News, ones with the name Perone and Kerr, recorded involved with federal evidences crimes with child offenders, with the St. Anthony's Church there. Identity theft, fraud, slanders, and their educators putting identity theft, fraud, slanders roles with Judge Smith, other judges putting fake things in, and tactically delusions wrought. See, we wouldn't have all these problems if you guys wouldn't change and fake what people say about with the short words. Same ones who want to pretend, and then they list. You guys are preventing lists from being used legitimately. The interbranch recorded that they can't afford to have lists appreciated properly, especially regarding their defenses of litigation and syntax regarding and exceptionage regarding, all natures of industries and contracts, like online. Facebook has roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, also with a Joshua, also with people with the name Fienza with the state of Connecticut, and the neighbors of a Fienza, I don't know their names, tied to conversations with a Joe DeMauro. I believe one of them was intimately tied to a Joe DeMauro. Or I don't know. And their roles with Eric Oliveri has something to do with he was influenced to plant like jump out of a car and take a beer off of a beer cap off. I didn't have no beer there. These are people increasingly trying to make it look like I drank beer. Ray Collo did that also with the Joshua Julian. But I never saw them with it with Joshua Julian. I mean, he did with the not Joshua Julian. What's his name? Daryl Chandler, and one of the women at Trinity College when she was a girl. Since she was a girl, she was influenced to put fake things in databases with people that also lied to my girlfriend with her, and with people with the intelligence families associated with the Tony DeMauro, involved with the Jennifer Cormier, and people with New Britain Superior Court, involved with East Hartford locations, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and federal evidences crimes with databases and the spots next to them. There's a 7-Eleven near a community, a CRT, community resources training place associated with New Britain Superior Court, further recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, having been roles with forcing a principal child offender and federal evidences crimes, identity thefts and frauds, further with security with schools too. We're going to examine this. They're calling attacks on themselves because they're also calling descriptions to them where they don't even let the people describe things because they just fake and change what's recorded. There's a mass problem with fake transcripts and wire crime acts and methods like that, mail crime acts and methods like that. Each database holds lies, even the truths are used for lies, and to screen actual motivations. A breaching method knew it would have to keep A through Z differences roles, blaming other things, others themselves, for what nature's demonstrations of it itself. And had to have their motivations for that hid too, because they knew it's the motivations. Well, in other words, why are the suburbs designed the way they are? And why? And because it designed before America's founders were born, and their house is still standing. Others communicated about the founding locations, about the founding plan. Then our founders communicated, and self-value rolls with that because there's new uses of sense and sensibilities, sick with calmness and sick with aggression, sick with happiness. You guys are exactly the way the breaching method needs to keep its identity of relativity to us from being discerned, which is hyper invisible, but still discernible because it is distinctly relative to, it is distinctly the cause of those criminal insidiousness. Nature's a positive treatment syntactically, value, and negative ones. As collusion/s. Again, right, where we can discern other things, others, ourselves. Forced to be blamed, right, for things our founders told us to blame on the breaching method, like where and how it reassigned what nature communicates about black people's right to life. Okay, I think.